Hello, everybody. Hello, Evan.
What's up, Ev heads and cam cells?
Oh, Cam's. Oh, great.
That's right.
Perfect.
Yeah. Your fans, they got manifestos, dude. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have fans, man. I appreciate the Cam cells of the world.
Yeah, Ev heads are party people, and cam cells have scary hard drives.
Yeah, Cam cells are on watch lists for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, they are burgeoning domestic terrorists.
domestic terrorists, domestic abusers. I mean, just all the things that I love.
Yeah,
and
the dregs of society.
Yeah, the real bottom of the barrel type shit.
Yeah.
So what's up, man?
What's going on?
Not much, dude. Just man, I gotta tell you, I've been fucking grooving on Waterloo tropical fruit.
Yeah, I haven't got it yet right now.
Oh.
Can check. I'm drinking some Plow, Polar Pink Lady Apple and Lemon. I reject the how they changed the name to just Pink Apple and Lemon.
Yep, it's I agree,
Plow.
but also that is an S tier seltzer.
Yeah. It's
All
just
time.
amazing.
I'm interested for your feedback. I would include Waterloo tropical fruit in the S tier. I think it actually may be my favorite Waterloo flavor.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of
I'm
them.
gonna have to swing by a Whole Foods to get it. That's usually what carries those around here.
Yeah, it's very good, and
Yes.
I really this is like my third sleeve of it, and I'm just loving it.
Yep. Yeah. I just stopped by Market Basket this morning and picked up a sleeve of Polar Toasted Coconut Poloco. I do love that one. And I was telling you, but I'll tell the listeners about some of the fine folks at Market Basket on Monday morning. I was in line to cash out, and this woman's trying to do like the card tap thing.
Yeah.
Like to pay for her order, and I was third in line, and there was this guy who had weird energy just right off the bat. Like sometimes you see people and there's just chaos, like some sort of chaotic miasma surrounding them. And this guy had that, and like
They're giving off just like like Pigpen in the Peanuts.
Yeah.
But like it more an energy than a physical cloud of
Yeah, not really such a smell as much as just like a distaste around him. And the guy just, and I'm not being hyperbolic with the level of sound that was coming out of this guy. He just goes, "Yeah, you gotta punch the card. You gotta punch the card on the card readers. You just gotta hit it." And it was just like immediately, like I was just like, "Oh fuck, I'm in this line, man." And then and he had like a bunch of, I don't know, something that he was buying, and the cashier, who was also a strange lady, she's just like, "Wow, you eat really healthy, huh?" To this guy, and he goes, "Yeah, my boss, he's got I'm babysitting his tortoise. His name is Sheldon." I was just like, okay. And he finishes ringing up, and then I get to the register, and I'm ringing out. And she just keeps talking to me. And she's like, "Oh, that's so funny. My sister, she had turtles when I was younger. She used to keep them in her closet. She had two snapping turtles. One was named Jaws, and the other one was named Stupid." And I was just like, dude, I gotta fucking get the fuck out of here, man. Keeping a snapping turtle in your closet named Stupid.
Dude, can you imagine? Like that's a room that doesn't. You're not having people over into that room.
Yeah, don't open the door. Don't open the door, please.
Well, also the room definitely stank.
Oh yeah,
Two
snapping turtles.
Two
dude.
snapping
Two snapping
turtles?
turtles named Jaws and Stupid.
Anyway, yeah, that's fucked. Evan, you used to have a snapping turtle. We were
did,
talking about
Grumpus.
this. So I actually knew this whole story. Sorry if my reaction didn't seem as fucking wow, whap, bang. But Evan actually texted me all this before the show. And Evan used to have a snapping turtle.
Yeah,
When we
was,
lived together.
Yeah, it had. My mom had fished it out of her pool, so it had been in chlorinated water for a bit, and she just threw it to the side.
Yeah.
And like it was like drying out for like days as a hatchling. And I noticed that it was still kind of alive, and I nursed it back to health. But I only lived for probably like a year or so after that, and then it just like it. I think something went wrong.
So I think we maybe need to adjust the
Yeah.
Definition of nursing back to health, then.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean,
you
he was
prolonged
okay.
its death.
He was fine with the pellets. I tried to, he was a snapping turtle. I tried to switch to fish, and he would just maim these poor fish. Like, he couldn't, like, quite, like, kill it, so he would just, like, grab their fins as they swam by, and he would, like, get, like, chunks out of them, and then they wouldn't die. And the whole thing just seemed real bad and torturous, so
you
and then
killed him?
eventually he just kind of died.
How did he die?
I just noticed that he wasn't really moving, and he just didn't move again.
Yeah. Okay. You think it was shell rot? I know that turtles.
I'm
get
not
shell
sure.
rot.
I mean, like I said, he was kind of slow. I feel like spending your first days in chlorinated water and then being left to dry for like 3 days probably just did some brain damage or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
his
motor skills were never quite.
He
good.
was maybe a little pickled. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Poor guy. His name was Grumpus.
Grumpus, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a sweet tank set up for him too. I spent a lot of money on that. He had like all these plants and obviously his nice filtered water constantly. His basking light, rocks and stuff. All these little alcoves.
Yeah.
Little guy.
R.I.P. in peace, brother.
Yeah, R.I.P. in pieces.
Well, speaking of gross little mud creatures, that's a good segue to talking
Discuss
about
the Belgians.
Yeah. So why don't we start the episode? Okay, the episode started. So today we are going to be embarking on a journey that I've known that I wanted to undertake on this show for quite some time. This is one of the first episode ideas that I brainstormed out when Evan and I decided we were going to actually do this. And we both made like kind of a running list of things we wanted to talk about. And a lot of those ideas exist now in the digital space, and you can listen to them. Like my Mongols series, which I spent a lot of time on, whatever. But one of my earliest ideas for an episode was to talk about Leopold II, King of the Belgians, and his funky little pet project in Central Africa, which is one of the kind of most horrifying stories of early modern imperialism and colonialism, and also bizarrely, but maybe not so bizarrely, one of the least talked about episodes in that sort of really dark period of modern history. So, and we'll obviously start to kind of explain more about that. I'm not going to give too much away, but basically everything you've ever thought about Belgian history is sort of not true. Sort of true. The Belgians kind of are really chill in a lot of ways, but arguably one of the most famous early Belgians, not super chill.
Yeah, I would just say in general, all of those like sort of Germanic, Central European countries, we're doing not that chill stuff in
Not that
Western
chill
and
stuff.
Southern Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, that history has been really actively suppressed or altered But particularly in the case of this episode of history, not this episode of the show, the Belgian government, up until relatively recently, up until like the 80s, really suppressed discussion of this because it's such a bad look, like really the worst look ever.
No.
And when this started taking place, Belgium, as an independent nation, had only really existed for like 50 years. So this really is sort of a foundational fuck up for one of Europe's modern, democracies, whatever. Yeah. So anyway, without further ado,
one more further ado. I do also just want to say that if Kim's going to be doing getting deep into King Leopold here. And for anybody who's enjoys these episodes, I would also recommend friend of the pod, the Ghost Boy Matt from Ghost Boys for the End of the World. He's currently got a long series called the Belgian X-Files, which is sort of looking at Belgium, I think, starting back here into like the Congo Free State, all the way up to modern day Belgium, and like some of the stranger things that perhaps NATO has been getting up to. In that tiny European country. So yeah, if you enjoy this, I would also just like to recommend that series as well.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't even know that he was doing that. Well, now I feel like I'm aping his swag, but...
I mean, no, I wouldn't say that.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, anyway, here we are. So go check that out, and definitely check this out. So, for starters, we've talked a lot lately on this show about modern issues arising from, quote unquote, post-colonial geopolitics and the sort of ongoing bloody legacy of Western imperialism. That's always been kind of an undercurrent for both Evan and I, even when we're talking about, ancient Rome or, like Rome and Britannia, things like that. I think one of the main reasons stuff like that really interests both of us is that the echoes of those things are still very, very apparent in modern geopolitics, right? And so, when we see like the ongoing genocidal massacre in Gaza and the proxy war between Ukraine and Russia, we're reminded that despite the best attempts by media and, like the U.S. State Department to deny this fact, Western imperialism is in fact still alive and well. And although the form of that imperialism has changed and evolved with time, the function, I think, has remained relatively static. Just control for profit, right? And nowhere in history was that more, in modern history, was that more kind of on the nose than in the episode that we're going to kind of start discussing today. So we're going to kind of get back to the history in the traditional sense, which is ostensibly the mission statement of our show, but obviously this show, like everything, has evolved a lot, and so we don't always dwell in the past like we initially did, but that's still kind of our bread and butter. And so I thought it would be fitting, since we've been talking about some of these issues so much lately, to touch on a subject that is hopefully going to draw some pretty stark parallels for the listener in attempting to make sense of the causes behind the chaos and the carnage that are unfolding in the world today. So as you may have guessed from the title of this episode and from the intro, I am talking, of course, about the personal pet project of one of the most singularly vile, conniving, disingenuous, brutal, and thoroughly detached of all modern Western imperialists, King Leopold II of the Belgians. Now, you may not have heard of King Leopold II. You might have. This is not as secret of a history as it maybe once was, not even so long ago, like when we were growing up in school. But it is still not super talked about. But you will come to despise this man, I hope, and hold him in the same kind of contempt that, we are taught to hold people like, Adolf Hitler, who have committed, horrible atrocities. I think it's time for Leopold II to start getting his dues as sort of an arch baddie of history, because this guy sucked big time. And I think what made him so interesting is that while he was sucking big time, everybody thought he was a great guy back home in Europe. And that, I think, is kind of interesting and unique. All of the other sort of big bads of history have had their fan bases, but also there's been pretty vehement opposition to them. And for a long time, Leopold II was sort of a celebrity for being like super woke and cool. And meanwhile, the whole time was not at all that.
He's the DEI king of Belgium.
Yeah, he's something for sure.
Yeah.
So also, like, I should mention, and I often forget to mention this whenever we're discussing the history of nations that still exist in the present day. If any of our Belgian listeners want to reach out with supplementary information or just their own takes on this, please feel free to.
Not even just Belgium. Anybody who studied this.
Yeah, anybody that knows what they're talking about. But I do particularly, I am particularly interested in. I mean, as always, everybody can reach out with information, but I'm particularly interested in whether folks in Belgium, like of our generation roughly, learn about this, because for a long time I know it was actively suppressed, even into like, close to the present day, but it's just fascinating to me. So anyway, without further ado, it's going to get a little dark over the next few episodes, but this first one's not too bad. It's pretty light. We're just kind of introducing some of our main characters and some of the backstory here. And so, I guess without much more fanfare, let's start to explore and discuss what I consider to be one of the worst examples of Western colonial violence and destruction in modern times, King Leopold's Congo Free State. So first things first, let's kind of discuss our primary antagonist. Since his name is in the title, and really we kind of owe the entire scope of this story to him. So on the 9th of April in 1835 CE, Leopold Louis Philippe Marie Victor was born in Brussels.
Motherfucker's
Belgium.
name was Marie.
Yeah, man, that's really common with like French noble boys. Of this era, Marie, very popular as a middle name. So the second son of King Leopold I of the tiny and newly minted Kingdom of Belgium, Leopold II, was born into the house of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, so named for the duchy his grandfather had ruled and lost during the Napoleonic Wars. If this house name sounds familiar, that's because it is technically the same house as the current royal family, actually of Belgium, but also of the United Kingdom. Though they changed the royal family of England changed their name to Windsor in 1917 to avoid anti-German sentiment, and they didn't want people realizing that they themselves were of German descent. So Leopold was a first cousin, not only of Queen Victoria of England, but also of her beloved husband, Prince Albert. So that's just that fun kind of European royal incest at work.
They are incestuous. Folks, they are incestuous.
They are incestuous. He spoke English.
Even still to this day.
To this day, it's still weird. They've cooled it a little bit, but I mean, look at how much flack Harry got for just like marrying like a beautiful American woman who is not his relative.
No, well, there's also her ethnicity. That's part.
Oh
of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
big time. But
like Philip Mountbatten is he's also like some level of cousin to Elizabeth II.
Yeah.
Or was. I guess neither of them are alive anymore, but
No, they were cousins for sure.
Yeah.
So his mother, Louise, was a daughter of Louis Philippe I, who was the penultimate monarch and the final Bourbon ruler of France during that tumultuous period when France was sort of just swinging constantly back from monarchy to republic to empire to back to republic. A series of bloody revolutions that started in the 18th century and moved right through into the 19th century.
Shouts out our boy Karl Marx with the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon.
Hell yeah. Following the defeat of Napoleon and the restoration of, quote, order to the Western European political landscape, the tiny nation of Belgium declared independence from the Netherlands in 1830. And by 1831, the French-speaking son of the German Duke of Saxe-Coburg, Leopold I, was selected as their new monarch. So really, the kingdom that he would inherit was only a few years older than young Leopold II. And by all accounts, it was considered to be a thoroughly modern kingdom. Having been established in the era of enlightened revolution and of burgeoning republics, from the get-go, Belgium had a relatively powerful parliamentary system ruled by a secular political elite distinct from the nobility of the day. Now, I don't want you guys to get it twisted. I'm not saying that they were actually, like, by modern standards, like, a wonderful, great thing. But for Europe of the day, Belgium was actually a fairly modern political entity. They didn't have this long history of absolutism, and with the political tides of the continent rapidly shifting, there really was little hope for the young prince of ever kind of ruling in his own homeland in the same sort of despotic manner of some of his forebears.
Yeah. It also Belgium also has the misfortune of being right between the lands that just variously now we call Germany and France.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and also the Netherlands. Like, it's not, the Netherlands shouldn't be counted out. And actually, the sort of ethnic landscape of Belgium is sort of drawn straight down the middle with more Flemish speaking or Dutch speaking people in the north and French speaking people in the south. The elite of Belgium has always been French speaking, but
and then a weird little German corner.
Yeah, there's. I mean, it's multi-ethnic, but those are the two main sort of groups there, and so and I mean that's sort of expressed in their royal family, who were French-speaking but rulers of a German duchy that inherited a rump state carved off from the Netherlands, and all of those countries, even the Netherlands, which was small, were major colonial powers at this point. And actually, the Netherlands more than Germany, I would say. Despite Germany being sort of militarily dominant on the continent, they did not have the same sort of overseas colonial chops that some of these other countries had. Yeah,
I mean, you still see it right now. There's the Netherlands, and then there's a separate polity called the Kingdom of the Netherlands that generally you'll see with international sporting events and stuff like that. That includes Curaçao and I think Aruba is still considered that, and then the Dutch Antilles.
So, in fact, anyway, this distinction and the manner of governance in Belgium is sort of evident in the slightly unique titular convention. The ruler of Belgium, the monarchs, the kings and queens, are referred to as the king of the Belgians, not the king of Belgium. That's always just been a thing. You don't often see the King of England described as the King of the English. It's
the King of the Angles and the Saxons.
Right. I mean, and sometimes you may, but that is the way that you refer to the Belgian monarch. And I think the notion behind that is that their rule was through and for the people, not rooted in some sort of feudal overlordship over a territory on the map, right? And that was important, to the Belgian people and to the Belgian parliament. So all good and well, thoroughly progressive and modern for 1830s Europe. So although he was their second son, the young Leopold never knew his elder brother, Louis Philippe, who died in infancy before the young prince was even born. So Leopold was raised knowing that he would be Leopold II, King of the Belgians. He was heir to the throne from his birth. And like any young early modern European noble, he was raised on tales of chivalry and heroism in battle and the noble conquest of lesser men by his ancestors and his forebears. So where his father came to power later in life and understood the privilege and the limitations that came with his role, and was sort of down to just be this sort of parliamentary monarch, young Leopold II was born to the purple, so to speak. And if we haven't hammered home to you yet on this show how disastrous that can be, let this be yet another example. Growing up with the privilege of royalty, things get a little weird sometimes. A lot of the Caesars knew it, and they did it anyway. But what are you going to do? At the age of 9, he was named Duke of Brabant and given the rank of lieutenant in the Belgian army. And while Leopold was a teenager in 1848, his maternal grandfather, Louis Philippe, was forced to flee France following yet another revolution, right? And died 2 years later.
The 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon. I was going to say, subject of the famous line from Marx, where he quotes Hegel, who said history happens twice, but then Marx specified first as tragedy, then as farce, being Napoleon, and then Napoleon's loser nephew, Louis Napoleon. Seizing power.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of entanglement with the Napoleons.
Yeah.
And I don't think I actually get to it yet in this episode completely because it happens later in the timeline. But Leopold's sister is actually, she becomes the Empress of Mexico.
Nice.
Do you remember that whole debacle where Napoleon's, was it, somebody appoints an emperor of Mexico as like a Napoleonic ruler, and they got executed. The Mexicans were just like, and that was like, and I don't even remember all the details around that, but that was like Mexico supported Napoleon, and then he like claimed them as like an annexed republic, and like there was a ruler installed briefly, and like the Mexicans were just like, no, we're gonna fucking kill this guy, and then they just did. So that comes up later in the story, but there's just a lot of fun tie-ins with the other like ruling families of the day.
Yep.
So Louis Philippe has to flee, ends up dying in like miserable exile in England a couple years later, and then later that same year, Leopold's mother Louise dies of tuberculosis, exacerbated by grief. She loved her father. She loved her papa, Louis Philippe, and she had named her first son after him, and then he died, and then the original Louis Philippe died, and it's just a bad time to be named
succumbed
Louis
to
Philippe.
consumption.
But I'll tell you what, it's a good time to be named Leopold.
Yeah.
All right.
This might be your only chance of moving on your own. Tulsa's not that far. Besides, if you'd stay, I feel a certain guilt. Did I hold you? Did I hold you back? Can I count on you if I fall apart? Yeah, if I fall apart. That's how I escape my certain fate. That's how I escape my certain fate. Innocence and all this is mistake. That's how I escape my certain fate. That's how I escape my certain fate. Honesty's an actor's worst mistake. That's how I escape my certain fate.
So Leopold grows into a young man of voracious appetites, both literal and figurative. He was a large man. He was a big boy. Not fat, just big.
Yeah. A
Strong
large
of
adult
body,
son.
long of limb. He would become famous later for his bushy, thick beard. He would eat massive meals. Like he would wake up and eat like a 2,000 calorie breakfast, and then just like do all of his business for the day walking. Like he was just like this. He was just a very interesting guy. And he was both renowned and then later reviled for his love of the ladies. When he was younger, it didn't seem like such a big deal. But the thing about Louis and these Belgian girls is, I'm sorry, Louis. I keep saying Louis. The thing about Leopold,
Yeah.
and these Belgian girls is he kept getting older, but they stayed the same age.
He was a pedophile, folks.
Yeah, he was. When he was 16, he was fucking 16-year-olds. When he was 68, he was fucking 16-year-olds. So, not super chill in that regard. At 18, he was married to Marie Henriette of Austria, a cousin of Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria, and a member of a cadet branch of the House of Habsburg. And let me tell you, she did in fact have a jaw on her. If you look her up, she had the look. Not as bad as some of her
The
predecessors.
seed is strong.
Yeah,
Yeah, let me
the
see.
jaw was still sticking around in the 19th century for sure.
Let's take a look at this. Marie Henriette.
Yep. Yeah, you might find her as the queen of the Belgians.
Oh yeah, that's a jaw.
She's got a jaw, right?
That's yeah. Some of these pictures, she's got a real fucking, real brick of a jaw here, dude.
Yep.
Yeah, she's not an attractive person.
No, she wasn't, and Leopold also did not think so. He didn't like her. They didn't like each other. It was not a loving marriage. They were a bad match, pretty much from the word go. But Marie Henriette was an intelligent woman and massively fond of the breeding and racing of horses. That was like her life's passion. And especially once she ended up in this like loveless marriage, she just like had to invest her time in something so she didn't go fucking insane. But she did basically just like slowly withdraw completely from public life. And so she would bear the king several children, but there was no love lost between them. And especially after their one son, predictably named Leopold, died in childhood. They also had 3 daughters, Louise, Stephanie, and Clementine, who Leopold II pretty openly just like despised because he thought women were fucking gross and dumb and stupid, and he just like didn't like them. So another example not being the most chill. In fact, one of the defining characteristics of Leopold's familial life going forward would be sort of just like enraged estrangement from his wife and daughters, with whom he would maintain like sporadic contact at best and would be like completely cut off from at worst, and whose total disenfranchisement and disinheritance became like a singular goal. So he one of his main goals, even though under Belgian law, which again for the time was pretty progressive, he was obligated to like leave things to his wife and daughters. All he wanted was to find a way to give them to like any male relative that wasn't one of them and like leave them nothing. He just like didn't think women should inherit, and he just hated them. He just didn't fucking like them.
Love me prophets, love me sons, hate me daughters.
Yeah.
Not a sexist, just don't like them.
Simple as. Basically, yeah. He I don't know, man. So somehow this guy ends up cultivating an image of being like this like progressive messiah, but he was like he was a douche
from the word go.
He was a douche from day one. Like just not a great fucking guy. So in 1855, when Leopold turned 20, he was granted a seat in the Belgian Senate, where he began immediately expressing interest in like colonial expansion and wanting to prop Belgium up on the global stage. And also realized very early on that the Belgian Senate and the government of Belgium wasn't really interested in being that kind of country. There was no drive for colonial expansion. They wanted things like universal suffrage and whatever. And so, again, at home, the Belgian government's actually doing a lot of pretty cool shit at this time. And they're not super into the idea of, like, expanding abroad. But Leopold's obsessed with, like, military, he wants to beef up the army, and he wants to be that kind of king, but he didn't inherit that kind of kingdom.
Yeah, you inherited Belgium.
You inherited Belgium, buddy, not fucking England.
Which Belgium at this point had inherited sort of the Napoleonic tradition, of liberal democracy.
Yep.
And the Napoleonic Code.
Yeah, they did, and much for the better, I would say. So that's why this is complicated, because Belgium, as a modern country, really wants to cling to that image of their past, and so there's a vested interest in not exploring Leopold, who, I mean, to their credit, you can't really blame the Belgian government for much of what's about to happen, because it really is Leopold who like does all this privately, like on his own.
Yeah, it was like the personal fiefdom of Leopold, as opposed to the Belgian government.
And we'll touch base on that. I don't want to go too deep into that until we reach that point in the narrative. But you got to cut Belgium a little slack. They've been a little sketchy
Not totally, but a little bit.
Yeah, they've been very sketchy about the release of information because they are rightfully incredibly embarrassed about this. Yeah. But the Belgian government was doing a lot of good at this time.
Yeah.
So he would, around this point in his life, he would also travel extensively. He spent a lot of time in North Africa and Asia and saw firsthand the sort of vast and varied lands that his illustrious political neighbors had conquered and quote, pacified, or more accurately, enslaved. And boy, if it didn't just give him a little bit of that cock envy. You know? Yeah. He was like, fuck, man. England is so great. They've got all this shit. Fucking France, dude, they got all this stuff. You know, even the Netherlands,
even the German pigs,
Yeah.
have got some shit going
They've
down.
got stuff going on, and it's just so cool. You know?
And I'm just up here in rainy ass Belgium.
Yeah, and I don't have anything, and I want stuff.
Yeah,
I want to be rich like them and powerful, and I want people to be like kind of afraid of me.
yeah.
So anyway, I think I've painted enough of a picture of the situation. Belgium is a small, modern, parliamentary monarchy with no history of conquests or any real prospects for empire building, surrounded by large and powerful neighbors who have a huge head start and have done all those things. And it's about to be inherited by this giant philandering douchebag who has been weaned on stories of military conquest and greatness. He's got this big old chip on his shoulder, and he's gonna fucking become king. So I think sick. Let's get this guy a crown. Let's get him fucking rocking and rolling out there. You know.
Yep.
So in 1865, Leopold I finally kicks the bucket, and a 30-year-old Leopold II is sworn into office and crowned king of the Belgians. So sick. That dumb old guy is finally gone. Now our Leopold, the main Leopold, can start working on advancing the interests of his people. I.e., he's going to start trying to amass vast personal wealth. But he plays the long game. He's smart about it. But here's where things get really devious and interesting. I'm not going to spend too much time patting this guy on the back because the point of these episodes is going to be to recognize the atrocities that he would commit. But it's important to at least make note of a few things so you really understand why the stuff that's coming catches everyone so off guard and why he gets away with it for as long as he does. Because here's the thing. By all accounts, as a constitutional monarch of his own people, he was a pretty great guy. He was often called the Builder King because he embarked on vast amounts of construction and infrastructure projects that he personally funded and also would push Parliament to fund, was really invested in rebuilding the country and modernizing the country and paved roads and giving the people, you know, monuments and museums and public parks and all these things. He liked all that. And people love that shit, you know?
Yep.
He also presided over and ostensibly approved of the unionization of the Belgian workforce, the establishment of universal male suffrage, the enactment of early child labor laws at a time when that really wasn't a thing. And he went on to make a real show of his outrage at the perceived injustices of the existing African slave trade, which was now illegal in all of Europe and in the Americas, except maybe with the exception of Brazil, which I think went into like the 1870s. But was still being practiced by those horrid, treacherous Arab Muslims over there in the Levant. And this became a very popular sort of down-the-nose talking point for the European elite of the day. They really loved to point to how disgusting those Muslims were over there engaging in slavery when, like, they'd been doing it too until pretty recently. Now, that's a really silly intellectual exercise to get bogged down in. Like, I do think that, like, somebody making the right choice should encourage other people to also make the right choice, and like slavery should have been illegal everywhere. But it does seem a little. You can't help but feel like it's a little disingenuous coming from these rich old white fucking European nobles, like,
Yeah.
you know, because they didn't like Africans. They didn't think they were people. They just had decided slavery specifically was wrong, and so like they were finding other ways to exploit those workers and basically get slave labor out of them without calling it that.
Yeah.
So it is definitely hypocritical.
And we're still doing it today.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That's one of the main points of me doing this episode now is so that people are listening and thinking, huh, this is like starting to sound pretty familiar. It's almost like nothing's changed.
It's been over 150 years. And
Yeah.
I feel like this is explaining a lot of the things that we still do today.
Yeah, man. It's almost like that's the true mission statement of studying history, you know?
Yep.
So anyway, he seemed for all observers to be a pretty chill dude who had no ambitions of becoming like a psychotically cruel, despotic ruler. But behind the scenes, he's got machinations. He's plotting. So, as I mentioned before, he privately harbored dreams of glory and conquest, and he viewed the overseas colonies of France and Britain with like a lustful jealousy, like really, really, really obsessed over it. He was like that Looney Tunes wolf with the bulging eyes.
Just whacking himself in the head.
Exactly. Like when he looks over and he sees like
his tongue rolling out and across the floor. Yeah.
He's rock hard for this shit.
Yeah.
So he begins to look at a map of the world and try to figure out what hadn't already been scooped up. Now, his neighbors had all the really good stuff on the North and the West African coasts and in India and the Far East. It's all pretty much firmly established in the orbit of some major European military power. But the sub-Saharan African interior is uncharted territory. Literally, though, no European has ever mapped out the vast African interior, which had long been fabled to contain untold exotic riches and creatures. And, for a long time, people thought that the famous lost Christian kingdom of Prester John was there. But it had basically proved impenetrable to outsiders, much to the good luck of the local Africans who did not experience some of the horrible things that had befallen their coastal neighbors. But the good times are about to end, because by the 1880s, Leopold is fed up with crummy little Belgium, and he's decided that it's time to finagle a little colony for himself. Now, if there's one thing you could say about King Leopold II, it's that he understood the importance of a good PR campaign. And this is something that's easily observable in the present day as well. The most vile and unlovable turds of society can often, through the wonders of public relations, eke out a palatable image and even amass a large fan base of devoted chuds to hang on to their every word and deed. I'm sure that the same guy comes to mind for both you and I here. Fill in the blanks. You'll figure it out. Anyway, in many ways, Leopold sort of revolutionized this concept for a rapidly modernizing age. A rapidly industrializing modern age, rather. In the past, European monarchs could exercise a fair degree of free reign in their personal lives, and often to a certain extent in their rule. In the 19th century, however, the wide distribution of newspapers, ever-increasing literacy rate among the common dregs, the advent of the telegraph, all of these things made it harder and harder for self-important Dick to do the things that they wanted to do. Today, this is magnified 100-fold with the internet and the 24-hour news cycle. But regardless, Leopold knew two things. First, he wanted colonies.
He wants those colonies.
He does. He really does. And not only for the potential wealth and personal gain to be extracted, which could potentially be massive, but also just for the prestige and the honor that would come with the conquest and the domineering of another land. He just thought it was cool.
Do you remember that part in The Wire when Avon Barksdale, he's like, I'm just a gangster, I guess, and I want my corners.
Yeah.
Just thinking of Leopold.
That's basically
I'm just a European monarch, I guess, and I want my colonies.
Yeah, dude. Everyone else has them. He wants them.
Yeah.
And I think, here's the thing. I think the point I'm trying to make here is that, even if he wouldn't have made a ton of money, he still would have wanted it.
He wants his corners.
He wants his fucking corners, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
Yep.
Second, he knew that he could not simply mobilize an army and seize this territory the old-fashioned way. The great European powers may have done that, but they had a vested interest in reducing competition from tiny upstart neighbors, and that's really reflected in this sort of superior attitude towards, new money almost, right? Like the idea that certainly we've got our overseas interests, but the age of imperialism and colonizing has come to an end. And you know what I mean? There was all this guffawing and hemming and hawing over the idea of some upstart new country trying to establish colonies. That would be seen as really gauche and just improper. And we couldn't possibly give up our existing colonies, that they depend on us, but we wouldn't try to conquer anything new. No, that would be outrageous.
That would be uncouth.
Exactly. So he just knew that if he started trying to do things the old-fashioned way, that he'd basically immediately just get stepped on by France and England, and they'd be like, nope, sorry, not happening. You shut it down. Also, the Belgian parliament itself remained steadfastly committed to political modernization and limiting royal power. So they weren't going to give him the go-ahead to do anything like that, even if he wanted to. While Leopold was largely beloved at home during his early reign, it was precisely because he seemed to be in lockstep with this program. So he knows that his image is going to plummet if he starts doing shit. He's got to maintain the image of being this modern builder king.
Yep.
So he had done his research, and he had decided that the largely untouched Central African continent was the prime target for his ambitions, and at least for a first attempt. Because he also toyed with the idea of trying to do things in Asia and even in Eastern Europe, and sort of settled on this because it was sort of off in the distance where nobody else was watching. And if he's going to make his first attempt at getting himself some land, it may as well be somewhere where nobody else can see what he's doing, you know?
Yep.
He doesn't want people to see his failures or his successes, you know? Mm-hmm. So eventually, he realized he just had to kind of come up with a pretext to explore and claim some land in this sort of untouched Central African continent. So eventually he decided that the best route would be to fund exploration of the vast Congo River basin, which until the mid-19th century remained basically untouched by Europeans. We now know that the Congo River is one of the largest in the world, but since it had been initially discovered to Europeans by Portuguese explorer Diogo São in 1482, it was basically left alone. Now, for one, Europeans' main interest in sub-Saharan Africa was the coastal trade in slaves and goods, brought to them from the interior by Africans. They were kind of happy to just take the trickle of ivory and gold and people that came to them from their African middlemen out to the coast. For another, natural barriers made traversal of the river a daunting enterprise. It was riddled with treacherous rapids and switchbacks, tons of diseases like malaria and yellow fever, and locals who, shockingly, didn't take kindly to smelly strangers with funny accents invading their land and would kill them. Good for them. All of these things made exploration of the basin seem like a waste of time up until this point. But not to Leopold, because Leopold wants a colony, and this land isn't taken. So in 1876, Leopold hosts the Brussels Geographic Conference, and he invites all the leading explorers and philanthropists and all these old men sitting around smoking pipes, drinking whiskey, and the Geographical Society of London, et cetera, to kind of come and hear the Belgian king outline his vision for a better, freer, more prosperous Africa, free from the evil Arab slave trade and the exploitation of vicious outsiders. But not European outsiders. He means Muslims. That would be wrong. He wants to bring them the enlightened way of European life. So he announced the formation of the International African Association, an organization which he claimed would be fully invested in philanthropic and humanitarian endeavors to raise the savage African continent out of darkness and into the modern age. Doesn't he sound like a nice guy?
Sounds great.
Yeah. It's obviously troubling rhetoric, but folks fucking ate it up. They love this shit. And this guy seemed great. Look at him. He's caring about the Africans. It's very cute.
Yeah.
So the king began to promote the notion of his personal seizure of Central Africa under the purview of the IAA at this conference. And surprisingly, nobody really seems suspicious of his motives. It doesn't mean people are jumping at the idea to fund him and help him do this. People are very skeptical of his ability to actually achieve his stated goals, but nobody's looking at him Leopold's obviously trying to colonize Central Africa. People are kind of buying into this shit. And this is Belgium. You know what I mean? Belgium's cool. They're young, they're hip, they're modern. He wouldn't do anything like that. His father was really chill. Leopold must be a nice guy too. So it's at this point, having begun to set his plans in motion, that the king realizes he needs somebody, now that he's kind of got people on board with this idea and they believe that he wants to explore this area for philanthropic and humanitarian reasons, he needs somebody to actually do the legwork and get the exploration done for him. And that is where Henry Morton Stanley enters our story. So I could probably write an episode about Henry Morton Stanley. He's a really interesting cat. He had a fucking crazy life, and he plays a pretty large role in this story. And there's actually a really great cast of characters to this story. And in part 2, I'm really excited to introduce you to a couple other people that are actually cool and that are not like little shitheels. But part 1, we're kind of just establishing the villainy here. So our rogues gallery. Have you ever heard that famous line, Dr. Livingston, I presume?
Yes.
Yeah, everybody's heard this, right? So this is famously, supposedly, Henry Morton Stanley's most famous line. So British missionary David Livingstone, who was presumed vanished on a long expedition into the African interior while exploring the Nile River, had been famously tracked down by Henry Morton Stanley in a highly publicized bit of 19th century news. So Livingstone, who was a staunch opponent of the Arab slave trade, which again was a popular take that in these days, had undertaken to chart the length of the Nile and discover its source. Nobody had ever discovered from whence the Nile flowed.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to do that, follow it all the way down into Central Africa. And then along the way, he was, kind of into like being a Christian missionary. He wanted to preach the gospel and also like kind of figure out a way to like get people in Central and Eastern Africa from being enslaved by Arabs. And I don't know, he doesn't have like a super clear mission statement, but he's trying to ostensibly do some good. And you know what? There's not a lot about Livingstone to suggest that he wasn't personally invested in what he saw as good. Now, you can take issue with the notion of spreading a foreign religion and all these things, but Livingstone was not, compared to other men of his day, was not particularly problematic. So I don't mean to paint him in an especially negative light, but he was definitely there doing some colonizer shit. And so he wanted to do all of this for God and Queen and country, and he had become something of a minor celebrity. And then this episode would really propel him into becoming like a national hero. At some point during his mission, communication from his party had ceased, and it became the highly publicized goal of many geographic societies and explorers to go and find this intrepid, brave white man and rescue him from certain danger in the dark continent. Well, in comes this random American named Henry Morton Stanley, who got an expedition together and toughed it out and sailed down the Nile, and lo and behold, he finally found Livingstone alive and relatively well on the shores of Lake Tanganyika in 1871.
Very nice.
And we know all of this because Stanley kept a diary and eventually published a book of his African adventure, which really played up this whole affair and is the origin of the Dr. Livingstone, I presume, encounter, which has permeated popular culture at this point.
Yes.
And did during the day. This was a sensation. And the two reportedly became fast friends.
Down there, huh?
Oh, yeah.
To the African Great Lakes.
Oh, he was way down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is actually very impressive. Just in terms of like a feat of endurance.
The largest volume by water and the second deepest lake after the famous Lake Baikal. And Siberia.
So the two, Stanley and Livingstone, reportedly become fast friends, and they spent a good deal of time together, with Stanley begging Livingstone to come back to civilization. A, to save him, but also B, to like prove that he found him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He wants the fucking bag for this.
Yep.
But Livingstone refused to leave because his mission was incomplete, and he wanted to finish charting the Nile. He found that Lake Tanganyika was not the source of the Nile, and he had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And he also wanted to free the African people from bondage, not only earthly bondage to the horrible Moor, but also the bondage of living without Christ.
Yes.
So seriously, I mean, people are eating this shit up. They love this stuff. So eventually Stanley, he's completed his mission, and he wants to let the world know. So with or without a living Livingstone as proof, he sets back off to Europe. And he would eventually publish a book called How I Found Livingstone, Travels, Adventures, and Discoveries in Central Africa. And he published that in 1872. So Livingstone unfortunately succumbed to illness in 1873 and was unable to corroborate much of the contents of the book. And if you read Livingstone's journals, they did meet. So he really did find him. But he doesn't mention the famous line, and there's not as much talk about like them being great buddies and this and that. But they did meet. So we know for a fact that Stanley did find Livingstone. But much of the saucier, exciting bits are very, 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 very possibly fabrications on Stanley's part. His journal has been recovered in modern days, and he had ripped many of the pages out detailing these events, likely to avoid people finding discrepancies between the actual like day of narrative that he wrote out and the later spiced up stuff that he added for the book. But this sort of tracks with the type of guy that Henry Morgan Stanley was. He's kind of an enigma, and his life had been a series of adventures and career changes and kind of lies, and he basically became a totally different person. Everybody knew him as an American, but he was actually born John Rowlands in 1841 in Denbigh, Wales, to an unmarried teenage mother who gave him up. He was listed on his birth certificate as a bastard. And he went and lived with his grandfather, who died when he was 5. And he was then shuffled off to some relatives, some kind of distant cousins, who very quickly realized that having a little boy was not fun, and he was a little too expensive. So they did him pretty dirty. They basically told him, like, oh, John, we're going to take you to visit your aunt in, like, another town. And so his cousin, like, drove him off, and then they just, like, dropped him at a fucking workhouse. And we're like, okay, we'll be back, and then just never came back. So right off the bat, some pretty traumatic shit for a young kid. He spent then the next big chunk of his childhood in like a Victorian British workhouse, which is not chill. It's like Oliver Twist type shit, you know?
Yeah.
It's been alleged that he was raped by the headmaster of the place, and later on would display some real difficulty with sexual intimacy that we now often identify with people that have dealt with, abuse.
Child sexual abuse.
Yeah. So he himself was not, didn't display pedophilic tendencies, but he was weird about sex. And in the opposite way, he kind of avoided it. He was very avoidant of physical intimacy for the rest of his life. And so I'll expedite the biography here, but at 18, he emigrated to the United States and slowly began altering his identity. Through like a series of like censuses and stuff, you can kind of track him slowly changing his name from John Rowlands till eventually he's Henry Morton Stanley. And he got rid of his Welsh accent, which would come out sometimes when he was drinking, so people would be like, what the fuck? Like, isn't this dude from, like... He would tell people he was from New Orleans, he told people he was from New York, he told people he was from all over, and then all of a sudden he's like sounding like a fucking rambling Welshman. It was,
Tommy Wiseau ass dude.
Yeah, he was I didn't even think of that, but he was a Tommy Wiseau ass motherfucker. Because he was fascinating. Yeah. But he was definitely like making shit up about where he was from.
Yeah, Tommy Wiseau claiming that he was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah, crazy.
Except
Absolutely
he's
crazy.
Got the very clear Eastern European accent.
He's definitely like a Czech man.
I think he's Polish. I think that's what Greg Sestero did research into it, and he believes that he was born.
And he sold like toys on the street in Poland.
That was in France that he did that.
Okay.
And that's why he started being called Birdman. He sold little bird trinkets.
Yeah, Weasel.
But
right?
but he came from probably Poland. the
Tommy Wiseau.
Iron Curtain. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so it is kind of that vibe. So this is a really interesting tidbit. He ended up reluctantly joining the Confederacy because he was living in the South at the time, and the war broke out, and he was pressured into it. And so ended up fighting for the Confederacy, getting captured, doing time in a Union prison camp, and then said, I'll just fight for you guys if you let me go. Joined the Union Army, and then later joined the Union Navy, and finished out the war fighting the Union Navy. And he's probably the only person he's probably the only person to have served in all three.
Yeah.
The Confederate Army, the Union Army, and the Union Navy, all throughout the course of the Civil War.
Nice.
And so as he was in the Navy, he kind of got into that world and got exposed to travel. And after the war, he decided to become a traveling journalist. And he would chronicle the great sort of overseas military expeditions and then also explorations of the day, which is a really popular topic. People loved reading about, the intrepid white men breaking into the dark, uncharted recesses of the world. Novels were based on it, later movies and stuff. It's just been a popular topic for, Western-pilled, Eurocentric minds for quite some time. Yeah. And then he eventually decided that he could just do the exploration thing as a profession himself. And so when word of the missing Livingston had resurfaced, he endeavored to find the man and write a book and get rich, which is basically what he did.
Yeah.
He was, as I said, famously weird with women, and so being on these long trips ended up sort of seeming like an excuse because he was engaged many times, but he like would then just like leave because he didn't want to like be around them because then he would have to like kiss them and stuff. So he would like get engaged and then be like, "I'm gonna go away for 2 years. I'll marry you when I get back," and like they would be like, "Okay, no," and like then get married, you know. And he did that a bunch of times, and he also became known as like a really brutal taskmaster when he was on these expeditions. Lots of African people died or were injured under his command because he did not value them as people, and he would just push them really hard and get people fucking killed. But he got the job done, and that's all that someone like Leopold would care about. So this brings us up to our, the present day of the story and the Brussels Geographic Conference and Leopold's hunt for an intrepid explorer to chart the length of the Congo and claim the interior for Belgium. And so Stanley gets wind of this. I think he attends the conference, and he likes the cut of this king's jib. And so it seems like it's time to link up. Let's make some fucking magic. These two are kind of made for each other.
They're going to suck and fuck.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of leave off with the story for here. I'm trying not to do marathon installments for you guys, but so these two they've collided. They're going to get together. They're going to explore the Congo. Stanley says, "I'm fucking up for it. I'm going to lead an expedition. I'm going to find the source of the Congo River, and everything I find in that basin, I'm going to claim for Belgium, for the king." And then he's going to swoop in, and he's going to set up this brilliant philanthropic free zone where he's just going to make everyone's life better. And then I'll look like a hero, and he'll look like a hero, and everybody's going to come out on top. And there's no way anything could go wrong, right?
Everything will go right.
Everything's just going to go right. This is looking really good for everyone involved. So anyway, so that's where we're going to leave off for today. Next week, we're going to pick up with the Stanley expedition, which is going to penetrate deep into the heart of Africa. And we're going to see whether or not this experiment turns out to be great.
Yeah.
What are your predictions?
Oh, it's going to go awesome.
Okay.
Everybody will be happy and partying, and there will definitely not be people getting brutalized for rubber.
Yeah. I personally think that Leopold is going to end racism.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, our DEI king. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think he can do it.
So the Portuguese fellow that you named earlier,
Yeah.
Diogo Cao, apparently also goes by the name Diogo Cam.
Really?
Yeah.
Jogo. I thought it was... So I didn't enter the letters when I was... Because I don't.
It's
like
a regular C. It's not.
It's a
like
regular
the C
C
with
okay,
the
I
dingleberry.
thought it was a
yeah.
C with
and
the
it's the A with
cow.
the
So it's like the
cow. Yeah, it's cow. Diogo cow.
Jogo cow.
Well, that's a little Brazilian
Jogo
flavor
cow.
to it. The Diogo. It's Diogo cow.
Cow.
But yeah, also AKA Diogo Cam.
Wow.
Well,
you've found me out.
the synthesis, yes.
Yep. Yeah, so that's the start of our little series here on King Leopold and the Belgian, or the Congo Free State, which would later be known as the Belgian Congo.
Yeah.
And, stick around because it's going to get fucky.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you've enjoyed this episode and you've enjoyed some other episodes, why not consider donating a small monthly amount to help keep the podcast going. And if you would like to do that, you can go to patreon.com/leftunread, and you can leave a small monthly donation. And once we get to about 50 subscribers, we can start doing some little promotional stuff or episodes, things like that for our subscribers. Yeah. If you cannot afford to support the podcast, you can rate and review us on your podcast app of choice that allows such things to occur. And you can also help us spread by word of mouth by telling people about us, your friends or your family, your loved ones, your arch nemesis that you still want to have a nice thing for them to listen to, anything like that. Yes.
Yeah, because how else are you going to steal away all the light of their life if they don't have some light in their life to begin with?
Yeah.
You want your eventual triumph over your enemies to mean something. So you want their life to be worth taking.
Yes. And they'll be like, no, there's more episodes I haven't listened
I
to.
haven't finished the series about the Congo Free State.
And then you just, like, rip their throat out.
You drive the fucking point of your fucking Chris knife deep into their fucking heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
You pour their life's water into the sands
your
of Dune.
steel gauntlet and push it into their eyes and pop their head like a grape.
Yeah, dude. You rip off their dick and balls and you feed it to a goat.
You fucking gnaw on it like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that would be really cool if you guys signed up.
Yeah. That's right.
All right. Well, yeah. Without further ado, without any more ado, no more adieus. We've used up all of our adieus. We will bid you adieu.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful week.
We bid you adieu.
Goodbye, sir. Good day. All right. Have a great week, guys, and we will see you again soon with another installment of Left Unread. Goodbye.